Greetings! In this tutorial, we will see how to keep Flash messages open for several pages until the user requests to close them. At the moment, the message displayed after our 302 action will get deleted as soon as we navigate away from the page. Also, in the documentation, there is a section that suggests to introduce a close button next to each message, but it's a bit meaningless since it will go away anyway. To make this code example a bit more meaningful and make the Flash Messenger a bit more user-friendly in case we have to be aware of some warning for several pages at a time, we're going to first make sure that the message is, first of all, accessible to all pages, and then design a mechanism by which the server is notified that the message has been closed and it does not need to generate it as part of the template on future requests unknown the users. If you would like to view this tutorial in Russian, I finally have a parallel channel up where I will post the tutorials there first and then in English. So according to the documentation, we're suggested to have a close button around all the messages, or we can have a close button around each individual one in case we have several and we want to get rid of them one at a time. Doesn't matter. Let's see what we get when we implement the suggestion. This will be in our module configuration for views. Module config from the portal side. Currently we have a UL and LI separating every message. What we will do instead is take out the list and instead have a button at the end of every message that closes it, so as a separator. The button type button class close. This is bootstrap code, nothing overly interesting from the PHP side of things. This is just to make bootstrap be able to apply some jQuery for you to have a close button available. The actual button is an HTML code times button closed. Every message is a div, so that needs to be closed. And in between every message, we have to start the follow-up message. So %s to make it equivalent to the opening. In case that wasn't very clear, Flash Messenger is based on a container plugin. The container has some kind of an array in it. So let's say we have item 1, item 2, item 3. Container wants to have 3 pieces of information: how to start the iteration, what to put in between as it transitions from one item to the other, and what to put at the end of the iteration. So there is like some kind of for loop that cycles through each item. So for each item as item. This is just some pseudocode. It doesn't actually do this, but generally what's happening is we have the opening format here, message open format, and message close string here. And as it cycles, as it echoes out each item, it's going to have something after each one. That will be the message separator string. So the final result looks like our div item 1 followed by the closing button. Then of course we have to close that div, and before we start in a new item 1 we have to start a new one. That way we have valid HTML code. And so on we go. Final item. And everything is closed with a closing div and a closing button. which means we have to replicate this chunk in the closing message. Fix some typos. This means got 2 S's. What does that look like? Refresh the page. Well, wrong page to refresh actually. Go to edit. Probably should do a menu next. Try to submit, and we have the close button that closes. I don't like how wide that message actually is, so I would like to modify the layout to have these not so far up in the header, but more towards the container. Try to edit, submit. Okay, that looks a little bit more reasonable. Good place to commit now that we have the user controls. We are committing this against issue number 3 because I messed up my GitHub commit numbers. This is add close button to each message. Now what the documentation doesn't tell us to do, and it's not the documentation's fault, that's fine, it has improved a lot, but still it doesn't tell us that once we navigate away, that close button is pretty meaningless, it still goes away. To fix that, the first thing we need to do is to extend the lifetime of the messages. In the profile controller where these messages are generated, instead of using this add success message shortcut, we will instead do manual add message. The first parameter will still be the message we want to display, followed by the type of message. This is a success message from FlashMessenger, namespace success. And the second parameter is the number of hops. That is the number of pages or the number of times this message can be viewed before it is deleted from the session storage. Actually, if we look at what the add success message shortcut does, it does an add message with namespace success by default, and then it uses a hop of equals to 1. That's why that message disappears straight away after you view it, because the default is only 1. We're going to make it something much larger than that and delete the original one. For the upcoming example, I'm going to need more than one message. I will also have a warning. This should be deleted. Warning, same 100. However, if we go back to the page, we try to do our submission, edit, submit. Even with a large hop value specified, once we navigate somewhere else, the messages still go away. That's because current function we're using to display them in the layout is render. Render does not just output messages, but also happens to delete them. It just dumps everything out of storage and prepares it for a new set of messages. If we want to render only what this particular page needs to have, given all the restrictions that we put on the render, we have to say render current. That is the currently available messages, not just all of them. Once we have current enabled, and we go back, and with our 302 post redirect get, there is no danger of resubmitting the data by accident. We can go back as much as we want. We try to navigate away, and the messages now remain there because they have not been deleted. We get only the ones that are currently required to be viewed. Of course, if we try to close them, we go somewhere else, they repair right back. So we have to give this a bit of a thought. There are three ways that we can do this. One is to do an AJAX request, but that will make this a little bit too much like single-page application. Plus, we have to do REST-compatible controllers that are capable of doing AJAX, and doing all of that just for a single close button is quite difficult. Alternatively, we can have a typical GET request where we redirect away. So it's just a non-JavaScript button that goes to a regular URL that will be designed specifically for something like message close ID. But that's an extra redirect away. Extra page load for just a close button will make it easy on a server to do, but a pretty poor user experience. Third way, pretty lightweight, not very intrusive, is using cookies. Remember that European Union law that stated everyone should put a message about do you agree to use cookies or not? But if you don't agree, you obviously don't click on accept. The next time you load any page, it's going to ask you that question over again, because to remember the answer about whether you want to use cookies or not, you have to save a cookie. We will do something very similar. Every time we click the close button, we're going to set a cookie that states all the messages that have been closed. Once we go to a different page, that cookie will be sent along, and the server will know that somewhere before the user has chosen to not see the message any longer. It's going to delete it from the container of Flash messages, and the template will not generate that message anymore. That is a lot to do. We'll start by, first committing what I haven't committed before, which was extend lifetime of Flash messages. And then I will actually start by going back to the layout here already and add in a JavaScript block that will add an event listener to all of the close buttons, so I can add whatever code necessary to generate a cookie for them. Start with script, type, text JavaScript. We're going to need a controller of some kind. Let's make this a self-executable function so we don't pollute the global namespace. We will make a FlashMessenger. So var FlashMessenger. Since in JavaScript functions also double as objects and classes, we can instantiate it with new. That way we have nice isolated space that we can treat as a constructor. Controller itself, message controller is going to need to have close buttons somehow collected. Let's think about that. How can we collect all of these close buttons? Inspect the element. Okay, so the new version of Chrome decided to put styles at the bottom of the DOM navigator, which is quite inconvenient. So I don't even see how to move it or close it. Okay, not very happy about that. Let's see how far we can deal with that. It's pretty annoying. So select close button. I have so much less space to work with. And I'm just not used to have these buttons at the bottom. Why must so many updates these days in the modern world of software be so meaningless? One, I still have plenty of free white space on the right where this could go. And two, have there been really no better ideas that they could push into this update? So as we can see in this miserably small space, we have a button of class close sitting within the class alert. We can create a strict selector rule for this combination to ensure we're only affecting alerts and only close buttons within alerts. So if there is some other button that you may want to place, that's not going to break anything. So let's test our selector in the console. That is thankfully still quite large. Let's say we have, first of all, alert. How far does that get us? That gives us the 2 alerts that we have for the buttons. Then let's see if we can get the buttons of just class closed. We can use button class equals close. Actually more convenient inverse the quote types. Class close. That gives us the 2 buttons. We can combine it together so we don't have any unpredictable other HTML types. And now we have just the close buttons within the alerts. We can take this query and put this in our JavaScript selector. So document query selector all. Put that in. And for each of those buttons, we need to attach an event listener. Let's have a queue of messages that need to be deleted. Remove queue. It's going to be just an array. So when we click, we will have a add to remove queue function. Don't know what to do with it yet, just placeholders. Now to link the buttons with the add to remove queue function, I can go in the initializer. We will say this close buttons for each of those. We will have button index message and arguments. I just know that these are the 4 arguments that the for each function will receive. Even if I don't use all the parameters, I still put them in just so I understand what the signature is. That way I don't have any unpredictable results. JavaScript has enough unpredictability already. I'll minimize that by making sure I know exactly what data gets inside of my function. Here, since I know that query selector all gives me an array back, I can attach a function for the iterator. And as the iterator cycles through this array, the first parameter is going to be the pointer to the button. So I can take advantage of that, and I can say button add event listener. We're listening for click, and I want to attach to message controller add remove queue. Since this is a function pointer, most likely it's going to have a run this. So if I do this here, it's going to be actually pointing to the button. I want to make sure that this remains to be the instance of this object message controller. For that, I'm going to bind it to message controller. Init is not a default constructor. We're going to force it to run within the constructor space. So message controller init. And just as a quick test, we can say console log close clicked and the button that happened on. Close, and we got our click event. Now it may be a bit awkward to use message controller within message controller. Let's have this refactor to a separate function that's going to be called attach click handler to close buttons. Yes, I like clone function names that are descriptive. Better nice long read than wonder what in the world that thing does. So for each, we are going to activate that function. This dot attach click handler to close buttons. Make sure it is bound to this, and that we can have this. Add to remove queue and bind to this so the click handler doesn't take over. Let's see if it explodes in our face. Yep, the click events still work. Now we have to think what useful information can we extract out of the button that we can put into a cookie that the server can interpret and figure out exactly what messages need to be deleted. What we're typically used to is getting an ID of the element and then matching that ID in a user interface with the ID in the backend storage. But there is no ID here. It's just a set of messages being sequentially entered into the FlashMessenger, and who knows how does it keep track of them. Well, I actually do know, and I'll show you how I figured it out so you can solve similar problems on your own. Let's go over to the module for the portal. This will be a good place to catch the cookies that are coming from the front end, so that we can instruct the view not to render the messages we don't need. We've seen many times before how to intercept a signal at the beginning of the application dispatch. That is through get event manager, attaching MVC event dispatch. You can borrow one from up there. Perhaps move these into individual function when we get enough of these. The module is getting a bit too busy, but not too bad yet. What we have not seen yet in the new series is getting controller plugins from outside the controller. That happens through a special service called Controller Plugin Manager, which in itself is a service manager. An important idea to keep in mind is Service Manager is just a component module. It is not a global singleton instance on which the entire application is built. Its entire purpose is to have a key-value relationship between the key being the name of a service and the value being an instance of a service. That does not imply it should be exclusively used in the application module space. Other components, other area of applications can have their own independent mini database of names of services. No one is restricting other modules, other applications, or us from doing my services equals new service manager or database connections equals new service manager. In this case, what the controller plugin folks have done is they created their own mini database of services and they called it Controller Plugin Manager. Controller Plugin Manager is registered in the application service manager. The plugin manager equals SM for service manager get controller plugin manager. Now we do need to get an instance of a service manager, which we haven't done yet. We can do that at the top. SM is application get service manager. Import it into our Lambda function. And now that we know that the controller plugin manager is in itself a service manager that has key value pairs of own services, so we can say flash messenger equals controller plugin manager get flash messenger class and type it as flash messenger so we know how to work with it. When we look at the definition of add message, we see it adds them to a container that is instantiated in its own local scope. Get container. If the container doesn't exist, it gets one, puts it into the session manager, but the bottom line we have a container that keeps track of all of the messages. And that container in turn extends from array object, which is a PHP standard library object-oriented class to manage arrays that is alternative to procedural array underscore functions. Based on that exploration, I can deduce that I can directly access all of the messages entered by first getting access to the container. So message container equals flash messenger get container, and from that container I can get the array object of the types of messages that I'm looking for. Let's say that we are currently working with warnings, so we're doing offset get, which is an object-oriented way from SPL to get the keys. We're looking for warnings, and we only have one warning, so that's not going to be very interesting. Let's do another one. Let's say I need to post tutorials more frequently, or maybe even better, please use the donate button. We get our breakpoint. Let's look inside of the warning container. It is an SPLW linked list, which unfortunately Xdebug still up to this day doesn't know how to look inside. So we have to hack around that, unfortunately and inconveniently, and say for each warning container as warning, and I just do something silly here. We got our first message. This should be deleted, followed by I need to post tutorials more frequently, and the donations should be done so I can actually do them more frequently without hunting extra jobs. And the warning we saw earlier, flash on a screen, is also a side effect of using a breakpoint within Xdebug inspecting the SPL container. It will go away once you remove all the breakpoints around SPL arrays. So all of this information and exploration combined tells me that I don't really need message IDs, because all the messages stored in the SPL array object are sequential the same way they are sequential in the output on this page here. Therefore, this is index 0, 1, and 2, and those can be treated as IDs to look up the index position 0, 1, and 2 of the warning container for me to delete them. How do we know the index of them? Well, as we cycle through the query selector all results, we're actually going from the first to the last one that it finds. If we inspect that cycle through the breakpoints, we go to sources. This has changed as well. Oh, this is so horrible. Are you kidding me? This hurts almost as much as my callus on my foot, or maybe even worse. Okay, we find the script that we've done. We put a breakpoint in attach click handler to close buttons. All extra lines are coming from the debug toolbar, which inconveniently adds a whole bunch of its own code, so just have to try to ignore it. Let's refresh. Breakpoint, we got our first index 0, this first one, the profile successfully saved. Click in next, the first index for the second button, then the second index, and so on. Now we actually have more indexes than messages for the warning, because here we're also rendering the green success namespace. So if we want to explicitly deal with warnings alone to make this tutorial slightly simpler, let's restrict the query selector to only give us close buttons for the orange warnings, not the green successes. Right now JavaScript gives us 0, 1, 2, 3, when we know that the warning SPL array has 0 corresponding to here, 1 here, 2 here instead of 1, 2, and 3. Easy fix. We just make our names a bit more explicit. We'll call this warning close buttons, and we say alert dash warning. Save, refresh. Now we got only 3 lists. First one being a close for the this should be deleted, not the profile successfully saved. Very good. Then we're going towards the other one that's scrolled out of view, and that's good. What's not good, besides the horrible layout of the debug view, is we don't have an easy way to pass this index into and remove the queue function. We only have an event object, but it does not give us the index position of the button. But we already use this bind function to specify what is the meaning of this in the target event function. And bind also happens to allow us to override the parameters that go into this function. So here is a neat trick. If we put a breakpoint in the add to remove queue, we click on a button, we get the first parameter as the mouse event, because that's what gets passed whenever the click event happened. If we also tell it to pass in additional parameter forcefully besides the default event object, we can say that the first event gets the 0th index, second event in a for each loop gets the first index, index 1 since it's 0 based, and so on. So now if we put that as the first parameter, shift the event object as the second parameter, and put a console log back for a bit, log index e, refresh that, try to close one, and now we see that when I clicked on the third event, we get the second index, 0 based array. When we click on the first one, which is a 0 index, we get index 0 as the first parameter, and the event object shifted as a second parameter. So a little neat JavaScript trick we can use to figure out exactly the position of the closed message that will correspond to the array index in the PHP server. We can now add that index to the current queue of all the removed indexes. So remove queue, push that index. Check that out. I am really struggling for space here. So we get rid of the second one. Now we get rid of the third one. And let's see this. Remove queue, we got the first index being queued up. So now when we click another one, we're going to have 2 queued up. There we go. 1 and 2 have been queued up for deletion. And now the only thing that's left is to convert that array into a cookie. So when we go to a different page, that queue gets sent to the server. The best thing to do is to modify a cookie to add the indexes as you close the messages. But cookie manipulations are very hard to do by hand without a library, and I'm not going to force you any particular library to use. Even if you are sticking with jQuery that comes with a skeleton that many people remove, even that doesn't come with a cookie library. You have to get third-party plugin to do that. I'm not going to force you to go with any specific one. So to keep it generic on the front-end side, the best I can do is to overwrite an existing cookie, which I can do by hand. Document cookie warning remove queue. Overwriting cookie has some disadvantages when you use multiple tabs. So if you closed one message in one tab and second message in the other tab, only one of those will take effect. So warning remove queue. This dot remove queue join with a comma, and we need to add a path under which this cookie becomes valid. This is very important because at some point server is going to have to notify the client that this cookie needs to be removed. If this cookie stays forever, then the server is going to try to delete the same message over and over again. But it will not be able to do so if the path is going to be different for every page. Let's see what happens doing it the wrong way first. When we refresh that and we open the cookie panel, that's now under application, cookies. We try to refresh. We try to close one of them. Thank you for the breakpoint. We see that the warning remove queue has been added with the initial value of the 0th message that needs to be deleted. Now we go somewhere else on a different tab. Look at the cookies. We try to close a different one. Refresh the cookie view. We see now that the same queue has been created for each page. So when a server tries to clean up the warning remove queue, when we navigate somewhere else, it's going to do it just for here. And when we go back to the original page where the message originally was created at, it will not be cleared up because the path will be different. The cookies are managed based on the path. So when I navigate from here, it's going to try to remove them all over again. To keep all the pages in sync, we enforce it with the path to the root of the site, so it doesn't matter where you went, the cookie will be reliably cleaned up. Before we refresh, let's clean up the mess that we created. Delete that one, delete, delete. We refresh. So if we delete something from this page, we got the warning remove queue initialized. And then we try to delete something from this one, a whole different page. We see that the warning remove queue has been reliably modified for the same path. A new one hasn't been created. To pick these cookies up at the server, we can inspect the HTTP headers. Those are managed by the request handler, which is part of the MVC event. So cookies equals E, get request, get cookie, and I just know that that method is available, even though there is no code completion for it. We get cookies back. And just to prove that this indeed works, with our very helpful breakpoint, try to refresh. And we got our cookies, all 3 of them that we saw in the debug panel. In case no messages have been deleted, need to exit out of here so we don't get warnings about trying to access non-existent keys. So if not set cookies warning remove queue, and we return out of here. Then if that key does exist, we have warning remove queue and the warning remove queue key. That is a comma separated string, so we'll explode it by the comma, override the original string, and in case if we have any empty keys, trailing commas, then we can get rid of them straight away by saying array filter by strlen. That is a trick that will get rid of all array members who have a 0 length value. Finally, this is still going to be an array of strings while our key is an integer. So we want to run a function that will ensure this is an integer array, so we don't get any strange warnings from the SPL library. Warning, remove q equals array map. That is a function that's going to apply function that's in the first parameter to every value in the array. So if we put a breakpoint here and then here, we will see how after deleting a couple of these and we go somewhere. First, the warning remove q is an array of string values, and once we apply int val as a map to all the values in the array, we have warning remove q now an integer array. We still cannot, however, delete them at this point, because if we close the messages not in exact reverse order, once we start to modify the array, the iterator is going to break. Let's say we have an array like this. We have some values A, B, C, and D, and we want to delete values at index 1 and 2. Well, once we delete 1, because it happens in sequence, delete 1 gives us a new array A, C, and D. As we continue the cycle of the array, we want to delete 2 now, which happens to be A and C. That is not what we expected, because if we say we want to delete index 1 and 2, we expected B and C to be deleted. Instead, we got B and D deleted. If instead we say delete second, then first in a strict reverse order, then we, on the first iteration, have A, B, and D, and on the second iteration, we get A and D. Now we have the result equal to our expectation of removing B and C. In PHP, to make sure we are removing in the reverse order, we will apply a reverse sort function on the warning remove q, and can do the actual deletion at last. For each warning remove q as message index, if, just to be sure we're not trying to remove rogue indexes, in case we have tabs that fell out of sync, warning container message index doesn't exist, continue. If the thing does exist, we're going to say warning container offset unset message index. Now, why does this work? In the procedural array underscore functions, they do not operate on the same array. Every time you do something to them, it returns a whole new array. But array object from SPL has its method operate on that array object itself. Therefore, any modifications I make here, like deleting a message at a particular index, is going to go through a pointer right back to the FlashMessenger instance. Last thing remaining is to delete the cookie so that the subsequent page loads do not cause the script to crash by trying to get rid of the messages already deleted before. That is done by setting a new cookie with the same name with a past date. Zend Framework lets us do that in 2 steps. First one is to create a cookie using a set cookie object. First parameter is the name, warning remove queue. Second parameter is its value. Third parameter is expiration date, which will be something in the past, such as 1 year ago. Third parameter is the path. That is the path that we talked about in the beginning to make sure this cleans it up for the entire site, not just one page. And the second step is having to send this cookie to the browser. If reading the cookie is done through getRequest, then sending a cookie is done through getResponse. The getResponse method has a getHeaders method, which I also just happen to know is there, even though the code completion doesn't think there is. And to the headers, we add a new header. That is the unset cookie. This may look a little awkward, but it makes sense if you digest it. The first method is getHeaders. Doesn't really mean get individual headers one at a time, which could make you wonder how can you add a new header to already outputted headers. Instead, think of this as the getHeaders container. So once you imagine this being a container, then it does make sense to add yet another one to the container of multiple ones. As for why would you want to put a cookie inside of an addHeader method, that's because cookies are just strings within the overall header. Headers broken up into field names like accept, character, and so on, but they're not really any fancy data structures, they are just strings. That's all. It's just a set of strings, and someone decided on a convention to interpret certain characters like spaces and new line characters as a way to tell what is key and what is value. So if I have a class or an object that is capable of transforming itself into a string, like setCookie is, then it makes sense to add it into a function that adds a string header. Okay, let's see how this whole contraption works now. Start by going to our profile editing, where these all get created. We try to close second one, then maybe the last one. Try to go to the home page, and they have gone away.